Hey everyone, and welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you were watching Boyd News. Want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I've got a breaking news report coming out from Ukraine, and today I have an update to share with you regarding Ukraine's use of long-range missiles to strike military targets deep inside Russian territory. Let's take a look at this new report here on your screen. Ukraine no longer needs permission for long range strikes in Russia. Zelenskyy said Sunday that Ukraine is conducting long range strikes against Russia using domestically produced weapons and does not coordinate its targets with the U.S. So, this is very big news. This is actually a topic we have covered numerous times over the last year. If you guys remember late last year during the Biden administration, before Trump got into office, Ukraine was trying to strike targets in Russia using ATACMS missiles, which are ballistic missiles that are provided to Ukraine from the U.S. that have a range of up to about 300 kilometers or so. And reportedly, they've tried to use this many times to carry out strikes inside of Russian territory. We've heard that the U.S. was barring them from launching a lot of these strikes, and they had to request permission. So there was a lot of issues last year with being able to go after targets inside of Russia. And now Zelenskyy coming out as of yesterday on Sunday, while in this picture you can see here he was holding a conference meeting with Mark Carney, who's the Canadian Prime Minister, and he announced this while speaking with him that allegedly they can now strike anywhere inside of Russia using their own missiles, which we have been seeing this already. Ukraine's carried out numerous strikes with their Flamingo missile already. We know they're also working on the Sapsan ballistic missile system. Reportedly, that has already been tested and has had some success as well. So Ukraine does have their own missiles, their cruise missiles, and also ballistic missiles they can use to fire inside of Russia. And I want to talk more about this today because actually over the weekend, we had a story that came out, and I want to show you this briefly here real quick. This was on the Kiev Independent. It says Pentagon has quietly barred Ukrainian long-range strikes in Russia with U.S. missiles, Wall Street Journal reports. Yeah, the original report from the Wall Street Journal came out on Saturday on August 23rd. You can see this was being released yesterday, the 24th. And it says right here the U.S. has quietly implemented a review process giving Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authority to bar Ukrainian long range strikes inside Russia with American missiles, effectively blocking strikes for months, the Wall Street Journal reported on August 23rd. The unannounced high level Defense Department approval process has prevented the use of Army tactical missile systems, known as ATACMS, against targets inside Russia since the late spring, an unnamed official said. Yeah, so this is what the Wall Street Journal was reporting that allegedly since back in the spring of this year, this current administration has already been blocking Ukraine from being able to utilize ATACMS missiles. And I'm not sure if Ukraine still has some of these. Maybe they do. And if they do have a few of these, maybe that's the reason why they haven't been firing them is because the U.S. administration currently under Trump right now is not allowing them to fire these inside of Russian territory. So I wanted to bring this story up briefly just to show how things have changed so much just coming from the last year. Because I remember last year reporting so many times that Ukraine was being basically handcuffed, hands behind their back, and not being able to fight back against the Russians, go after targets that are behind, inside of Russian territory. Let's say it might be a military base or something like that that Ukraine could be striking to prevent attacks onto their nation or to slow the Russians down. Ukraine wasn't given that ability just a year ago, but now with their own weapons, they can pretty much do this whenever they want and where they want. So I want to show you guys another report here real quick. Let's talk about this statement that Zelenskyy made yesterday. So this is from Yahoo News and originally from the Business Insider being cited today. It says Ukraine now has its own weapons to strike deep into Russia without U.S. approval, Zelenskyy says. This coming out August 24th, 2025, yesterday on Sunday. And it says here Kiev's long-range missiles mean it can now decide for itself to strike deep into Russia, Zelenskyy said. That would be a major change from when Kiev relied on Western approval for strikes over the border. His comment comes after a new report said the Pentagon had blocked ATACMS strikes against Russia. Ukraine can now strike deep into Russia without needing coordination with the U.S., Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said Sunday. As of today, we are using our domestically produced long-range weapons, and to be honest, we haven't been discussing such matters with the U.S. lately, Zelenskyy said at a joint press conference with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. Okay, so just think about that. That's just huge, guys. I mean, literally within a year's time, look at where Ukraine has come from. Heavily relying on the U.S. for support, relying on their permission to be able to strike targets inside of Russia. This is something that I've mentioned numerous times here on this channel throughout the duration of this war that I've been covering pretty much since the beginning of last year is when I started this channel. I've been stating for a long time that the longer this war goes on, the stronger Ukraine becomes. And not only that, but the more independent they become. Eventually, they're going to have all of their own weapons to be able to defend themselves. They don't have to rely on anybody anymore. So it's just wonderful to hear that Ukraine now has the ability to strike inside of Russia, not just with drones with smaller warheads, but they now have all these different missiles. They've got the Flamingo missile, they've got the Sapsan ballistic missile, they've got the Neptune missile that just been announced today. Long Neptune was just unveiled today with 1,000-kilometer range. So they can pretty much go after Russia wherever they want, when they want, and they don't need permission to do this anymore. And that is huge for them. And it says right here, there was a time when there were different signals regarding our retaliatory strikes after their attacks on our energy system, Zelenskyy said, referring to Russia's strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure. That was already a very long time ago. Today, we don't even mention it. The Ukrainian leader's statement signals a massive change in what had for years been a status quo in Kiev's deep strike capability. Ukraine, reliant for much of the war on long-range Western systems such as the U.S.-made Army tactical missile systems, typically needed approval from Washington and its allies for strikes into Russia. The ATACMS in particular requires U.S.-provided satellite data and targeting for successful precision strikes, affording the Pentagon greater authority over what the weapons can be used for. NATO countries, fearing escalation with Moscow, withheld permission for Kiev to launch attacks into Russia for months, limiting strikes to targets in Ukrainian territory. Yeah, that's what we heard a lot last year, if you guys remember that, when these strikes were being limited and Ukraine couldn't strike wherever they wanted to inside of Russia. They could mainly only strike within their own territory. So we'd see these being fired into like Crimea, for example, a lot. And a lot of that was due to the limiting of these strikes, and the U.S. Pentagon would have to give Ukraine permission to carry out those attacks onto Russian territory. So real quick now, we're going to jump on over to X. I've got a couple things regarding strikes inside of Russia I want to show you as well. So we're going to hop on over here to X with the Ukrainian Review real quick. It says Trump is preparing to lift restrictions on Ukraine's use of long-range missiles against Russia. That was according to U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, and we've been talking about him a lot. This is him right here in the photo. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham out of South Carolina. He's pushing a bill right now through Congress. If it does get a vote and passes, it would force 500% secondary tariffs onto any nations purchasing Russian oil. He's also pushing for a lot of other things to really put pressure onto Russia right now. He's a major supporter of Ukraine, major backer of Donald Trump as well, supports Donald Trump heavily in his decisions that he makes to put any kind of pressure on Russia to end this war. Although for the most part, we haven't seen Trump put a whole lot of pressure onto Russia, if you guys have been noticing. But he stated here a few things. I wanted to show you this. This is necessary in order to move to offensive actions and inflict much more serious damage on Russian troops. At the meeting in Alaska, Putin did make some concessions, significant, but not yet disclosed. However, he is only reacting to pressure. Next week, he also intends to introduce a bill to recognize Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. So these are allegedly some other statements U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham has been making over the last 24 hours or so. I'm not sure if he was in an interview or something like that. I tried to research this online. I could only find a few small outlets discussing this information. But allegedly, these are some things that U.S. Senator Graham had stated. And one of the biggest things here is he's talking about Trump preparing to lift restrictions for Ukraine to strike inside of Russia. Now, the fact that we had that report over the weekend from the Wall Street Journal stated that Ukraine was being barred even under the Trump administration from striking targets in Russia. That's something that I mentioned over the last week or so after we started to see these talks once again between Trump and Putin and Zelenskyy trying to get this war to an end. I had a feeling that what we might see coming in the future is maybe Trump is going to lift restrictions for Ukraine to strike inside of Russian territory if there is actual restrictions in place. So could that be a possibility? Could we see the Trump administration allow Ukraine to strike inside of Russia? We know they're receiving a lot of different weapons right now, potentially even some longer range missiles, and we do have some information on that. I want to show you guys this real quick. This is from Bricktop NAFO. It says in 6 weeks, Ukraine will take delivery of 3,350 ERAM or ERAM missiles, which Ukraine and its allies have purchased for the U.S. From the U.S. for $850 million. They have a range of 460 kilometers. However, the U.S. will have to pre approve strikes and can stop Ukraine hitting critical targets if they want. Okay, so this was actually being reported yesterday that allegedly Ukraine's partners in Europe actually purchased $850 million worth of these missiles. So 3,350 of these ERAM missiles. These are called extended range attack munitions. I believe these are cruise missiles with a 460-kilometer range. So you can imagine the targets that Ukraine could go after, possibly even reaching Moscow as well. And 3,000 of these missiles, that's quite a bit. And if Ukraine ends up receiving these very soon, which it looks like they're going to, they will be able to strike targets inside of Russia if Trump gives them the go-ahead to do so. So I wonder if that's going to be the next move here soon. If maybe we see that Putin doesn't want to end this war, which we're already kind of seeing that, but we're still kind of waiting for Trump to come out and acknowledge that and have to take a next step. So is this going to be the next escalatory step from the Trump administration is to allow Ukraine to strike inside of Russia, being given these missiles and maybe who knows what else they're receiving as well? As we know, a lot of weapons come from Germany. They're classified from Germany, so we don't know exactly what type of weapons Ukraine is receiving all the time. So yeah, very big news, guys. I mean, we could definitely be seeing some major strikes inside of Russia here very soon with missiles. On top of that, Ukraine using their own missiles right now, which they're currently working on. We know that the Long Neptune cruise missile, also the Sapsan ballistic missile system, along with the Ukrainian Flamingo missile, all of those are entering serial production right now. So very soon we're going to see all types of different missiles slamming into Russian targets in the future, and that will hopefully put enough pressure onto Vladimir Putin to potentially end this war, but we'll have to see how things play out. So just wanted to bring you guys an update regarding the situation on long-range strikes inside of Russia and give you some details there. So let me know what you think about all these details down below in the comment section. That's going to be it for today's update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.